Welcome to the Kickstarter Weekly, everyone. This week's video is going to cover campaigns that are completing their funding between November the 21st and the 27th. I've got 3 different campaigns to talk to you about today, but before I do that, I'd first like to talk about the 8 different games that I was able to get played this week. If you're enjoying the content that I put out, the best way to support the channel at this point in time is simply to like and subscribe. And by the end of the year, the beginning of next year, I will be relaunching my teach and review videos with much better equipment. I'll be moving into an upstairs studio space. I'll be launching a Twitch channel in which I'll be streaming games. And at that point, I'll probably launch a Patreon. Until that time, the best way to support the channel is simply to like and subscribe, as well as leaving comments. And something that I'm specifically looking for in the comment section is feedback on the new arrivals, as well as maybe the games that I've personally backed, which are the last 2 sections of the video, because those are games that I've backed and I will be getting in eventually, as well as games that have just arrived. So those games are all kind of ripe for the teach and review videos that I'll be making, and I definitely want your input. I want to know what games you'd like to have teach and review videos made for. So if any of the games in the last 2 sections are games that you're wanting that kind of content for, please let me know and I can bump it up to the top of my production list. And again, I should be starting to produce those new teach and review videos around the end of the year. Okay, let's get started and talk about the 8 games that I played in this last week. One quick note at the top of this section. I've been talking about some of the same games lately from video to video because I've been playing and replaying some games. And as much as I'm trying to tailor the content for newer people who are still continuing to find these videos, I know that I don't have a huge subscriber count right now. So most of the people watching these videos may be finding them for the first time. So I have been putting some effort into repeating myself, which I don't think benefits people who are watching all the videos. So I'm going to take a little bit of a new tact with this section. And even though I'm talking about games that I may have talked about in previous weeks, I'm going to stop repeating some of the same information, for people who are finding this channel. So if you are finding this channel and something I'm saying about a game interests you, the game interests you, you can look backwards and see if I've talked about it previously. Maybe I've talked about it more. If it's something that I'm glossing over fairly quickly, I probably have talked about it at length recently in previous videos. But I want to keep things smooth sailing for everyone, so I'm only going to be talking about new information for the games that I'm talking about additional times. And one of those games is top of the list. It's Barrage. I have talked about this one before in recent weeks. It's a game that I was playing online, and then I got to play my physical copy. I talked about some of the production issues that plagued that game and how much I generally really love the game. I don't have more to add at this time for Barrage, other than as I continue to play it, I continue to really love the game. I think there's a high amount of strategy in it. It's a heavy Euro, worker placement, and there's an expansion that I have that introduces more mechanics, another faction, and there's a pretty robust solo mode. So those are things I'd like to continue to explore, and as I explore them more in the future, I only got 1 play of the game in this week, but once I get a bunch more plays and I can talk more about the solo mode or about some of the additional mechanics in the expansion, the Leewater project, I will definitely be back and talking about those elements that I haven't talked about before. For now, Barrage is going to continue the score that I've had for it, which is a 9.0. That's a really high score. I feel very solid about that score. I think it's possible it could go up to, say, a 9.5 once I play the solo mode and I play some of the expansion content. But the game is a favorite of mine. I really love it. Lacerda is one of my favorite designers, and I would put this game right up against any of his. So 9.0 stays solid. From there, I go to Caper Europe, which I played 3 times this week. I've talked about this one as well. I'll just say that this is a really, really good head-to-head 2-player game. It uses hand management, area control. You're playing a tug of war for 3 different locations. They're different every time you play it. There are different kinds of locations. when you're playing it. So the base game has sort of a general set of locations and then 3 additional sets of locations that take place in different cities. And if you're playing with any of those cards specific to those cities, there'll be some additional scoring rules. Now, I won't talk about the mechanics of the game because I have talked about them before. I'll just say that I continue to like this game. I think the strategy element is really, really solid, and it's a very good game that you can play in a short amount of time, not too much setup, with really good choices. And I think this one is really sticking in a niche as one of my favorite 2-player games. Probably that and Curious Cargo are going to be my favorite 2-player games. I still like Patchwork. I think Patchwork just doesn't have quite as much going on as these 2 games, but it's definitely a close third for me and probably the next in line. So again, Caper Europe is going to continue with a score that I've given it previously, which is an 8.5. I've also talked about Descent Legends of the Dark in the past, so I'm not going to go into too much detail with that other than to say in general, it's a game that I really want to love. I've had some high expectations for. We have not been having a great time with it. There's been a lot of problems with the design of certain scenarios and the way that information in those scenarios is not clearly communicated. So I think our overall experience has been one of a lot of disappointment. We really wanted to like the game. There are a lot of things about it that we do like. When I originally started playing the game, I was rating it around an 8.5 and hoping that it would go up. And over time, that rating has just declined and declined, and it's now down at a 6.0. I think I'm going to leave it there. I could drop it even further, but I think I'm going to leave it there. We had actually a good experience with the game this past weekend, but it doesn't really make up for all of the problems that we've been having as we've been playing through the campaign. So much so that it's had me excited to go back and try to play Descent 2nd Edition. And I do have the base game. I don't have any of the expansions for that. I was looking around, including at Fantasy Flight's website, which is now owned by Asmodee, and everything on there is out of print. I don't think they're going to be reissuing any of Descent 2nd Edition. I don't think they're going to be reprinting it at all, which is a great disappointment as well, because I think that is the good Descent game. With this new one, which it says Act 1 on the box, that seems to indicate that they will be moving forward and creating more acts, although I think this one undersold, and I think other people have been having a lot of problems with it as well. So I don't know if they will follow through on that and create more acts in the Legends of the Dark line. I won't be buying it. That's for sure. I will be selling my copy when I'm done playing it, and if there's no Descent 2nd Edition for me to purchase after we play through my copy of the base game, I'll just be moving on to other dungeon crawlers, which is really unfortunate. Personally, I'm hoping at this point that they scrap any more Legends of the Dark games and maybe just go and do a Descent 3rd Edition that's heavily influenced by 2nd Edition. I do plan to do a full review on Descent Legends of the Dark in the future, probably around the end of the year, beginning of 2023, with my friend Ryan, who I've been playing through the campaign with, joining me for that review. So you'll be able to hear perspectives from 2 different people. So for now, Descent Legends of the Dark is going to come in at a 6.0. We have 2 scenarios left. We expect them to be very big, overlong scenarios, as a lot of the ones kind of nearing the end of the campaign have been. And if they are very, very long, overlong, and have some of the problems that we've been experiencing throughout the campaign, it's probably likely that my final score for Descent will end up in the 5s, or maybe even the 4s, probably the 5s. But I think if we have more problems with it, it will dip below a 6. For now, though, it's going to stick at a 6.0. I also played Jekyll versus Hyde again, and this is one that I've talked about previously as well. However, I will talk about this one a little bit more, because when I played it for the first time online on Board Game Arena, there were some aspects of the game that I wasn't fully understanding. It's a trick-taking game, and one person is playing Jekyll, another person is playing Hyde, and the Hyde player wants all of the tricks to be won by one player. It doesn't matter who. So they're trying to either win all the tricks or lose all the tricks. The Jekyll player, which is probably thematically indicative of Jekyll, right, as a persona, wants balance. So the Jekyll player is trying to get both players to win or lose an equal number of tricks. The way this works is at the end of a given round, you'll look at the total number of tricks, and for the variance, a marker will move along a track towards Hyde. If over the course of 3 rounds that marker gets to Hyde, Hyde will win. If the marker doesn't get to Hyde, meaning Jekyll's done a very good job of balancing who's win and lost, then Jekyll will win. Now, I'm not a huge trick-taking guy. I just want a little bit more strategy than what I often find in trick-taking games. Although I do like this one, and I think it has elements that you don't find in other games. But when I talked about it previously, there were 2 elements that I wasn't understanding. And I'm going to talk about those now. And I think these things elevate the game in my mind. I'm still not going to give it a hugely high score because it's not really my game. But if you like trick-taking games, this is unique and it's really good for what it is. So I think someone that likes trick-taking games may rate this one in the 8s or the 9s, and it's a game you definitely should go check out. If you don't want to just run out and blind buy it, I'd encourage you to go and try it out on Board Game Arena, where you can play it relatively for free. You need a membership on Board Game Arena, which is cheap. Memberships are cheap, but you need a membership there to start certain games. And I can't remember if you need one to start a game of Jekyll and Hyde or not. So in Jekyll and Hyde, there are 4 different suits, 3 different colors, and then a suit of potions. And the potions will trigger a token. Now, the potions depend on which suit you play it with. So as in most trick-taking games, if both players are playing the same color of suit, or they're both playing potions, then whoever plays the high card will win. But if you play a potion against someone who's played a colored card, then you will trigger a power, and the power depends on the color of the other person's card. There are 3 tokens on the table. Each of them has a different power, and they're each associated with a different color. So there is some strategy in how and when you play a potion, because triggering that token could help you in some way that just helps you, period, or may do something to change the trick winning situation so that it's not just the high person wins. It might add an element into the game that changes the scoring situation. The other thing that happens is when you play a certain colored suit, those tokens will be placed out in an order. Because there's 3 colored suits, purple, red, and green, whichever colored card gets played last of the 3 in a round means that that card will then be the strongest. So as with a lot of trick-taking games, if one player leads with a certain colored suit, you have to play that same suit if you have it. But if you don't, then you can play anything else. And if you play another colored suit, whoever wins the trick, that's going to be based on the order of strength, meaning whichever cards were played later that round, those colored cards that were played for the first time later in that round, those cards will be the stronger cards, and they will beat out any colored cards that are before it in that line. So I think adding in potions and the way potions trigger and the effects that potions have, as well as that ability for some tricks to be won by the color of the suit, which is going to be variable every round based on, when those colored cards are played, it adds a lot more strategy in the game and ways to do little things to change things up. And I think both of those things, in addition to the whole Jekyll and Hyde thing, where one player is trying to either win or lose, and that could be variable in a certain game. A player could start out thinking, I'm going to win all the tricks, and realize it goes south very quickly, and then says, no, I'm going to try to lose everything now. And then the other player is trying to keep a balance. I think all of those things taken together give this game a lot of personality, a lot of uniqueness, and a lot of really good strategic choices. So I'm going to give the game a 6.0. Again, that's just because I'm not a huge fan of trick-taking games, but if you are, definitely seek this one out. As I said already, I think you'd probably rate this one in the 8s or the 9s. I also played Lost Ruins of Arnak this period. I played this one twice. I have talked about this one previously, but I'll talk about it a little bit more because I played the Snake Temple both sides, which is the back side of the board. And I've never played the Snake Temple before. It changes up the tech tracks on the side of the board. It changes up the way some of the assistants work when you get them. They're normally on the bird temple side. Normally on the Bird Temple side, you're just going to get the assistants, and then they'll be increased in power as you move your book up the track. On the Snake Temple side, though, one of those assistants is in a space kind of in the middle of the track, and so you have to get up the track that far to get that assistant. The other thing that happens with that assistant is when you get it, it is exhausted, so you cannot use the assistant that round. You won't be able to use it until the following round. So that changes some things up. And in the first game that I played on the Snake Temple, I really wanted to go heavy into the tech track during that game because it was new and I wanted to experiment with it. But the way various things came out, it just didn't work for me to do that. So I went heavy into monsters instead, and I really didn't do as much with the tech track, which was an interesting situation. Then I played it again, and I was able to go heavier into the tech track. Although even in that game, my goal was to get up the track, first, make it to the top first and score the most points. And I was ahead of my opponent on that track for most of the game. And then at the very end, she whisked by me and got the higher score. So Lost Ruins of Arnak is very situational, and a lot of times your plans are going to be changed by what happens in the game. Now, one of the reasons that I like Arnak so much is because there is so much variability in the game, the way things come out, the way the game is designed. So you've got little artifacts that you'll get when you go to a new temple. You can use those artifacts to trigger some bonus powers, but when you do, you lose victory points. You lose more and more victory points the more that you do that. So it makes sense to do it early on. Later in the game, it's a tougher decision. You're like, do I want to lose 4 points to get these items that I might need to kind of keep my engine running, to get up those tracks, to get certain cards, to be able to go to a certain location and do something or beat a monster. And if I don't beat the monster, I'm going to get a fear card and I won't get the additional points for beating that monster. There are a lot of decisions and there are a lot of variables in this puzzle. And even though the game comes in as a medium weight game, maybe medium heavy, there are all of these choices that kind of overflow into each other, and I think I could see this game causing someone severe amounts of AP. But the more I play it, the more I find ways to kind of dance around certain things. And often you'll find yourself in a certain situation where you're like, gosh, how am I going to get up that track 3 spaces this round? Or how am I going to pull this off? And there are so many ways to do things that it allows you lots of ways to tweak your gameplay and through discovery, find different things and kind of change your plans. I find the game really, really compelling, and the more I play it, the more I want to play it. I think it's going to remain an evergreen game for me forever, and a lot of that is just the design. Now, I believe this is the first published game for the designers, Min and Elwyn, but this really has me looking forward to any future games of theirs, because the more I play the game, the more I see how solid the design is and how deeply solid it is. I do have the expansion, the Expedition Leaders, and I'm probably playing that this weekend. So in next week's video, I likely will be talking a little bit about that. It brings in different factions, essentially, different people that you can play as, and each one has a different power, a different ability. So it has asymmetric powers in it, and as variable and cool as the game is, that's going to change it up even more. Some of the faction leaders I really want to rush out and play. Other ones I'm a little wary of. They look not necessarily daunting, but just ones I'm like, I don't know if I want to deal with that mechanic. But I do plan on playing all of them eventually, and you'll hear more from me next week on what I initially think about some of the characters and the mechanics, whichever ones I end up playing with. But Lost Ruins of Arnak for me is going to stay at the score that I've been giving it previously, which is an 8.5. It's just a really, really good game. On some level, there may not be quite enough thinky crunch to it to really kind of slide into the 9s, but there is so much kind of variable crunch to it. It's just a joy to play, and the more I play it, the more I could see it going up. I certainly don't think it will ever go down below an 8.5. For me, it's already confirmed that it's not a game that's going to go stale. It's not a game that I'm going to get tired of the mechanics over time, no matter how much I play it. Now, I played Paint the Roses for the first time this period, and I think this is the only game that I've played for the first time this period. And I played it 8 different times. It's on Board Game Arena right now, so it's in an alpha testing mode. So if you have Board Game Arena, you can go check it out there. There is a physical copy. I believe it was on Kickstarter. It's out there in the wild. I think it published maybe in 2022. And thematically, it's really a fun, interesting game. You're doing some tile placement. There's deduction. There's kind of a race situation. It's themed around Alice in Wonderland. So you're trying to outrun the Red Queen, and she will pick up speed as the game goes on. If you mess up kind of later in the game, she will more quickly catch you. I want to like this game, and it is inherently a very fun game. The way that you kind of place hedge tiles out, you're trying to match hedge types or flower colors. You're doing this to perform deduction on either easy, medium, or hard whim card. Now, as you move up in difficulty of these whim cards, the types of things that could be on those cards become more and more variable. So once you're playing with a hard card, there's a lot of types of kind of pairs of things you can have, and so it's much more difficult to deduce, and you need to rely a lot more on the placement of the tiles, because as you place these tiles out, you'll place cubes based on what you're playing and what's adjacent, and those cubes will offer clues to the other player, sometimes to yourself, about what card the other player has. I really like the idea of the game, and I think the design is very clever, but it doesn't feel very balanced to me. And I've played it even more than those 8 times. I played it a few more times since the 8 times that I'm talking about. But we've found, you can call it luck. I know some people don't like to call this luck, they like to call it probability. There are games where the tiles that come out in the market are of no use to you. They won't help you give a clue that is helpful in any way to the people that you're playing with. And the speed that the queen runs to catch you, if someone does a wrong guess, she will move 2 spaces. If someone passes, which you can only do 3 times in a game, she'll move 1 space. And then every once in a while, she'll pass another checkpoint on the board and her speed will double. And we've found that even playing a perfect game, there can be, tiles that come out that are unhelpful to a point that the game is unwinnable, even when you're playing a perfect game. But there are ways to make mistakes, obviously, and if you make 1 or 2 mistakes, it's almost impossible to win the game. It's near impossible to win the game even if you're playing perfectly, because of the probability of certain things. So for me, I do not really like this game, even though I want to like it. And there's a person I've been playing with it who I think really, really likes the game, and she doesn't really care if we win or lose. But I'm beginning to be frustrated by the general unwinnableness of the game. I don't mind losing. I just don't want to play a game where there's no way that we can win. It feels kind of pointless to me, and I'd rather just play something else at that point. And I've played the game enough to know now that this is not just me assuming certain things about it. It is a game where everyone's going to have to play really well. If any of the players you're playing with, make a stupid mistake and place the wrong thing, your game's almost over at that point. And then there can also be situations where the tiles that come out just make the game unwinnable. So I've kind of had enough of this game at this point. I think she still wants to keep playing it. Maybe I'll play it a little bit, but I'm really not enjoying the game, and I think it needed more design happening, a better balance. Maybe we've only played 2 players, so that could account for some of it. I don't think so, though. I think the speed at which the queen races to catch you, maybe the number of cubes in the game, I think these are things that may have needed to be adjusted to make the game more balanced. But I'm also not someone who wants to house rule games. I think there are people out there who like to house rule a lot of games, and they think that they know better than the designers, and I disagree with that usually, and I'm not on that bandwagon. So if I play a game enough that I realize there are kind of some fundamental problems in the design, maybe it wasn't tested enough, it just wasn't thought through well enough, my inkling is just not to play that game anymore. I don't want to do things behind the scenes to make the game playable. I think partly because in a lot of cases people do that when they're not understanding the game, so I just have a general dislike of house ruling things. I just don't want to do it. I just move on to other games. So for me, Paint the Roses is going to come in at a 4.5. I think players who enjoy deduction games may enjoy playing this game and kind of fooling around with it. I liken playing board games for the first time sometimes as you're figuring out mechanics to running into a room and just pulling levers and seeing what happens. And I think there's definitely some fun and joy to be had discovering this game, the way that the design works. And if that's something you want to do, then go ahead, do it. You'll have fun doing it. But I think, unless I'm wrong, I don't think I am, I think most people will get to the same conclusion as I have, is that the game is not fully balanced and is ultimately kind of problematic. So have at it, go for it if you like. But for me, it's a 4.5, which means that I'll play it again if people ask. I won't hem and haw about it. I'll enjoy it because the game is fundamentally fun. There's things in it that are fundamentally fun to do. But considering now that I feel fairly certain that the game is impossible to win unless no one makes any mistakes and you have probability on your side, which hasn't happened to us at all in, I think we're up to maybe like 12, 13 games now, and we've had games where we haven't made mistakes. So it just feels like a waste of time to me. And I would imagine that most people, if you play it enough, will reach the same conclusion. So Paint the Roses, 4.5. I played Tapestry again, which is another game that I played fairly recently, so I'm not going to go into a whole big spiel about it. But I will say that I continue to have balance problems with Tapestry as well. But there are a lot of kind of variabilities in Tapestry that can make up for that. And the game is just kind of inherently fun. And there may not be probability problems that kind of come up in your game. It's a little open, right? You might end up with a game like I did the very first time I played it, where everyone playing it was playing it for the first time. 3 of the players got below 100 points. 1 of the players got over 400 points. That was obviously a huge edge case where probability went one way. I've played it a bunch of other times where nothing that extreme has happened. And in those games, it then does fall back into, who's playing best, I guess. And I think that Tapestry is inherently a very fun game to play. So much so that I actually ordered the first expansion, Plans and Ploys. I wanted to order both the expansions, but the second one was sold out on Stonemeyer's website, so I only ordered the first. And I want to keep playing it. I want to give it more of a go. I've played it with my friend's copy, so she actually has an updated version that has the adjustments to factions, and that helps. I got my copy very, very early on. I think it was a pre-order. So when I go to play my copy, I'm going to need to make sure that I print out the updated rules for factions and things like that, because I don't have them. I just have the early imbalanced faction rules. So I'll need to make sure that I play it with the new faction rules. Some of the factions, their powers were adjusted, and that does help. But there is still a large degree of imbalance in some of the tech cards and in some of the Tapestry cards. And that's an ongoing problem. It's not a huge enough problem to make me never want to play the game again the way I do with Paint the Roses, but it's something that I'm aware of. And the fact that it's not always a problem, combined with how fun the game is to play and how tactile it is. There are a lot of really cool little building miniatures you're going to be putting out on a player board, doing some kind of area filling to score points and resources. It is just an inherently fun game to play. So I will continue to play it. I will accept the imbalance of the game, and I will hope that that imbalance is adjusted more and more with each of the additional expansions, and we'll see. So for me, Tapestry, though, it can't get a score as high as, say, Lost Ruins of Arnak, because it does have some problems, but it is fun. So I think I'm being consistent with my score of Tapestry at a 7.0. I might have even increased a little bit from the last time I scored it. I might have given it a 6.0 or a 6.5. So 7.0 is where I land on that now. And as I play the expansions, I will let you know if those change my overall score at all. The last game that I'm talking about during this video is Wingspan. This is a game that I just love. It's so pretty. I haven't played with any of the expansions yet, although I do have them all, and I just got my order in for the Wingspan nesting box with Asia, so I need to start playing with all of the various expansions. I like Wingspan a lot. I do think there is a little bit of a problem with Wingspan sometimes because of the cards. Sometimes you're just not getting the cards you need no matter how many cards you draw, and so that can be a problem. But I don't think that Wingspan has balancing issues. I think that's just a nature of the game. It does stop me from loving it as much as something like Arnak, because Arnak, I just find there's always ways to do things in Arnak, whereas in Wingspan, some of the time, you find yourself just kind of up against a corner where you can't do too much. And it's from randomness or from, bad probability. You're not getting certain cards, you're not able to put out cards, you keep having to pay lots of food for certain things. Things can just not go your way. However, Wingspan has lots of really good decisions, and when you are on a track where things are working for you, it's really, really fun to use all those kind of additional powers and really make things work. I know I'll be reporting in on Wingspan again in the future. I believe I'm going to play the new 2-player version. It's part of Asia. There's a version, I think it's called Wingspan Duet. So I think I'm going to be trying that out tomorrow, and I will report on that in the future, as well as the additional expansions and what I think they add to the game with their various cards. For now, the various expansions have all been continent themed. So with each expansion, you're getting like a new continent filled with bird cards for that continent. And I think that's another element of Wingspan that's really, really engaging and fascinating, is just learning about the birds as you play and seeing these different birds. And some of the powers and their abilities in the game are based on those birds. So you see which birds are kind of predator based, and some of their powers can derive from the birds themselves. So it's a little bit educational as you play, and I really enjoy that. And the art on it is amazing, and as far as I'm concerned, this is Elizabeth Hargrave's best design so far, although I did back the Fox experiment, and I'm really looking forward to that. Tussy Mussy wasn't so much my thing. I think it's a good design, but it's just a very simple, quick card game, and I like things that are a little bit more than that. And Mariposas she did was kind of a race game. I need to play that one more, but that was kind of a disappointment for me. I did not love Mariposas. I didn't think it was anywhere on the level of Wingspan. So for me, Wingspan remains the high watermark for Elizabeth Hargrave, and the designer who made that game is a designer where I want to keep buying her games. And I have a feeling from what I've seen that Fox Experiment will be more on the level with Wingspan. So tune in future videos. I'll be talking more about the various expansions as I play through them. But for now, Wingspan is going to get an 8.0 from me. So that means we're going to finish this section with some scores. Barrage is coming in with a 9.0, Caper Europe with an 8.5, Descent Legends of the Dark with a 6.0, Jekyll vs. Hyde with a 6.0, Lost Ruins of Arnak with an 8.5, Paint the Roses with a 4.5, Tapestry with a 7.0, and Wingspan with an 8.0. And that completes the played game section for the week. Now, let's go and look at the 3 campaigns that I'd like to bring to your attention that are completing their funding this period. Before I talk about the first game, though, I'd like to briefly mention a game that I omitted from last week's video. Now, this is a game that I backed the first time around, but this was an expansion campaign, and I didn't want to back the expansion. I had mixed feelings about the game. It's role-player adventures. I think it's really fun, but it is one of those games which I equate to the Telltale series of video games, where they're purporting to give you character choices in the narrative that will change the story and make things significantly different. And I played through this one with Kristen. We played the entire campaign. It's a sort of dice rolling, dice mitigation game. It's kind of like a D&D campaign. So each time you play a scenario, you're playing through like a different D&D module, and there's a bigger story that you're kind of following. There's 3 different factions in that game, and as you do certain things, it will affect the different factions, which then allow you to take or not take certain answer choices when you're doing things through a storybook. I really liked the game a lot. I liked the design of it. I felt that as we got to the end of the game, it became a little bit too easy. We were able to just kind of breeze through everything. And maybe it was partly because of that I began to notice that the narrative choices that we were making didn't really have any impact. So like a lot of these video games or games work, if you're crafting something with a big narrative story, you can't really diverge from that too much. So whatever you do, there may be a few cosmetic changes, and for some people, maybe that gives them enough to make the experience feel more personalized, but it sort of felt hollow to me. They kind of just kept funneling you back to the same thing. Now, I still enjoyed our play. I think Kristen grew to dislike it even more than I did by the end of it, but I didn't need more of it. So I wasn't going to back the expansion. However, all of that said, it's a really fun game. And I think other people will have a really, really good time with it. And I think it's a really good product that's been put out by Thunderworks Games. I just wanted something more from it. I wanted a deeper level of design than I think that they were able to do within what they were doing with the game, kind of budget-wise, component-wise, time-wise. And I mean, crafting these big storylines, it takes a lot of work. So I understand all of that. And they're working within a certain time frame. You do what you can. You put on these cosmetic choices as best you can. It just wasn't enough for me. I found Sleeping Gods to be similar in some ways, but a much, much better, deeper experience, and a game that I do want to replay, and a game that you need to replay if you want to explore all the content in Sleeping Gods. That doesn't even include the expansion that came with it if you kind of went all in on the Kickstarter, and they've now done a follow-up Kickstarter. So for me, Sleeping Gods is the way to go with that kind of stuff. However, I don't do all of this for me. And even when I'm doing, my scores for things, I try to tell you what I score a game and also say, but other people may like it better if they like this kind of thing. So I think Role Player Adventures, Gulpax's Secret was definitely a campaign worth highlighting. I left it off my list. And I think the reason that happened is because usually I'll either add something to my list to back, or it will go onto a list for me to evaluate for these videos. And this one just kind of fell through the cracks, right? I meant to put it on the list to evaluate, but because it was a game that I'd already played and I own, it didn't go on one list. And because it was a game that I knew I wasn't going to back, it didn't go on the other list. So it kind of fell through the cracks. And I apologize, because I think for a lot of people, this is a game that they would rate an 8, 9, somewhere in that range. And there are people out there who would really like to know about this game. So if it sounds like something that's for you, go look at it more. Maybe you can late back it. Hopefully you can. But it did complete its funding. I think it's completing its funding actually right now as I'm shooting. So by the time I get this edited and posted, it will be complete. But it is a game that I do regret having missed out, and I had originally intended to include it. And before I launch into talking about the first of the 3 campaigns that I'm highlighting this week, I'd like to mention 2 things. First, that if you are interested in any of the games that I'm talking about, I always provide links down in the description section to their campaigns. So just go down into the description section of the video, you can click on that link, it'll take you right over to the campaign, whether it's on Kickstarter, Gamefound, or Backer Kit. That way you don't have to try to go hunting for it. Also, my videos are always bookmarked, tabbed down here. So you can mouse over, see a certain game, whether it's in the played section, the campaign section, the new arrivals, the games that I backed from the previous week, whatever. You can go right to that section if you want to hear about a certain game. So the first game that we're talking about today is Tabriz, which is on Gamefound. This one had a minimum required funding goal of $30,000. They're currently at $128,000, which is about 4 times that minimum required funding goal. Tabriz is going to complete its campaign on Monday, November the 21st. This is a game for 1 to 5 players that plays in about 30 to 60 minutes. Complexity on the game is medium light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium high. Now, this is a worker placement game. It's got contracts in it. You're going to be moving around a market, activating different things, getting a lot of resources, managing those resources. It's very pretty. It looks like some other games out there, a little bit like Istanbul, although it has some different mechanics than Istanbul. But I feel like I've seen this kind of game before where you're walking around a market type setting, you're doing basically resource management, you're trying to fulfill contracts, but as worker placement, it's very pretty, and I think it's going to have a lot of visual appeal. Now, it's designed by Randy Flynn, who designed a game called Cascadia. The art on the game is by Sid Feeney, and it's published by Crafty Games, who've put out Abstract Academy, Dollars to Donuts, and Mistborn House War. There are only 2 different pledge levels on this campaign, so they're keeping it simple. For $60, you can pledge the Premier Edition. That's going to give you basically the deluxe version of the game. And for $85, you can pledge the Grand Bazaar bundle that's going to add in 2 things, metal coins and a punchboard dice tower that you can construct. Now, you can get those things as add-ons. Let's say you only wanted one of them. You could pledge the first pledge and then just add on whichever thing you wanted. The metal coins as an add-on are $30, and the punchboard dice tower as an add-on is $10. There is a third item that's available in the add-ons. It is a punchboard bonus tile and a punchboard dice pool. The thing is, if you were following this campaign before it started, you're going to get that for free. So you don't need that, add that on. It's going to come for free in either pledge. And I believe that even now you could go and follow the campaign and then pledge it, and you'd still get that. So my advice would be, if you're interested in this and you weren't following the campaign before it launched, follow it first, check and see if you're going to be getting that free gift, and then you won't need to add it on. But if you do get it as an add-on, it is also $10. In the continental US, shipping for Tabriz has been estimated at $20, and Crafty Games plans on delivering it in November of 2023. Unconscious Mind had a minimum required funding goal of $78,000. They're currently sitting around $758,000, which is not quite 10 times that minimum required funding goal. That makes it the richest campaign of this video and the campaign with the highest multiplier. This one is going to complete its funding on Tuesday, November the 22nd. It's a game for 1 to 4 players that plays in about 60 to 120 minutes. Complexity on the game is heavy, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium-high. Now, I'm really excited for this game personally. It's by Fantasia Games, who just delivered Endless Winter Paleo-Americans. The reason that I'm keeping the risk for the campaign at medium-high is that's really the only big game that they've delivered. They've got one in the bag. They did deliver Sweet Mess, but if you look at Board Game Arena, the score for that game is like a 3.5, so I don't even really want to count Sweet Mess. So I'm no longer keeping Fantasia Games at high, they're at medium high. I think after they deliver this one, if all is well and good, they'll probably drop down to a medium low risk. But my personal feeling for Fantasia Games is that I'm not worried. I'm not worried about any risk with them producing the game or delivering the game, but I think for consistency's sake, since they've only delivered 2 games, and only one of those kind of had rave reviews all the way around, I'm only promoting them from high to medium high at this point in time. But I'm very excited about this game, and I'm not personally worried about it at all. Now, it's a worker placement game. It's themed around psychiatrists like Freud. So you're going to be trying to solve your patient's problems throughout the course of the game. And it's got things like contracts, melding and splaying, which I'll explain in just a second, a rondel that you're going to be going around in the central board, set collection, and some really amazing cards with just really cool art, painted art. It looks like cards you might find in something like Dixit or Canvas. So the melding and splaying element in this card, when you get certain cards that you're going to be trying to fulfill their situations, to help cure them, because you're their psychiatrist, there are going to be other things that you layer over these cards which will add on circumstances to that card. And I think that's really, really cool. It's going to give the game more variability, and I haven't looked too far into it, so I'm not sure what the selection process is for that kind of layering. I don't know if it's random or if there'll be certain things that you can choose during the game, but it's going to give you more avenues to do things. And this is from an overall publisher and design team that I really love their stuff. So I'm going to this excited, and it's almost a situation where if there's a movie coming out that you know you want to see, you don't want to learn too much about it. Of course, I have to learn enough about it to communicate it to you all, but I don't want to go too deeply into it because I'm excited about the game. I want to experience it when it arrives, and I know it's going to be good from all the people involved. I have a high degree of confidence about this game in general, but I think that layering and the way they're using in this game, that kind of melding and splaying thing, is different and unique, and it's just upping the level of interest and fascination on my part and viewing the game as being even more compelling. So there are 4 designers on this one. Laskus, Johnny Pack, who's worked on Coloma, A Fistful of Meeples, and Merchant's Cove, Yoma, who may better be known as an artist, but has also worked as a designer. Yoma was one of the designers on Sweet Mess. And Antonio Zax, who worked on Apocalypse Universe, Galactic Arena, and Sweet Mess. There's 2 artists on this. Andrew Bosley, who's worked on Blood Bowl Team Manager, the card game, Everdell, Love Letter, Mission Red Planet, and Tapestry. And Vincent Dutray, who's worked on Jaipur, Lewis and Clark, The Expedition, The Quest for El Dorado, Robinson Crusoe, Adventures on the Cursed Island, and Role Player. And of course, it's being published by Fantasia Games, who have previously published Endless Winter, Paleo Americans, and Sweet Mess. Now, there's 4 different pledge levels to choose from on this one, although it's really 3. One has kind of a caveat to it, and it will make more sense once we get there. At $73, the pledge level that is called Ego, you'll get the deluxe version of the game, the Free Association Modules box, and an art print pack. If you pledge at $94, Super Ego, you will add to that the Nightmares expansion and a digital soundtrack. For $125, you can pledge one of 2 pledge levels, id or id Lite. The difference between these two is that id Lite is not going to come with the boxes for any of the things. So everything is going to be pre-packed into the big kind of base box. That's good because it can save you on shipping, 20% on shipping. And when I've looked at it, essentially when I give you the shipping costs at the end of this, there's going to be 3 shipping costs, one for Ego, one for Super Ego, and one for id. If you pledge id Lite, that discount will basically rebate you to the same shipping level for Ego. So you'll be getting the most expensive pledge, but paying the same shipping that you would pay for the cheapest pledge. However, there are a couple things that you won't get with that id Lite pledge from what I've read. And this is a little bit tricky because as I'm shooting this video, they're still adding on some more stretch goals. But they've also not wanted people to be in the dark about this, so they've communicated some of these things. And from what I'm hearing, that there's going to be an art book, a hardback art book added onto the highest level pledge, the id, as well as a standalone card game called the Dream World card game. And those 2 things will not be included in id Lite. So it's great to pledge id Lite because you're going to be saving the planet a little bit. You'll have less boxes that you'll be getting that you may have to throw out if you eventually kind of want to combine things. But you won't be getting the art book if that's something that you want, and you won't be getting that standalone card game. So keep checking back on the page with that to make sure as time goes on that remains true. But I believe that is the case. If you don't want the art book and you don't want the extra card game though, and you want to be a good upstanding citizen of the world, create a little bit less waste and save yourself maybe $5 on shipping, go with id Lite. In either case, you'll be getting the collector's box content, you'll be getting some Dream holofoil cards, and you'll be getting the large playmat bundle. Now, if you're ordering at the id Lite rate, you'll get that collector's box content, but you won't get the box itself. Like with everything else, like the Nightmares expansion, that content will be shipped in with the base game box, but you will get the content. Shipping in the continental US is estimated at $21, $23, and $26. So that is the estimate for each one of those 3 pledges. But keep in mind, if you're doing id Lite, you'll be paying the $21 shipping rate instead of the $26. So you'll save yourself $5. So you just have to make a decision of whether you want the art book and the card game and to save $5 shipping, or if you want everything, just stick with id. Finally, Fantasia Games is planning on delivering Unconscious Mind in December of 2023. That brings us to our final campaign of the video. It's called the Big Box Campaign. This one had a very small minimum required funding goal of $5,000. They're at $15,000 right now, so it's not a huge sum, but it is 3 times that minimum required funding goal. Now, the big box campaign is going to complete its funding on Friday, November the 25th. That's the day after Thanksgiving. So if you're going to be busy on Thanksgiving, make a note if this is something that you're interested in so you don't let this one pass you by. You don't forget about it. This is from Queen Games, and it is 3 different of their games, of their big box versions. So when we're looking at things like player count and complexity, they're all different from game to game. Escape: The Curse of the Temple has a player count of 1 to 6 players. It plays in about 10 minutes, and it's got a light complexity. Now, this is a cooperative game where you're going to be rolling some dice. You're literally trying to get out of a temple before it kind of falls apart on you. It's a real-time game. It even comes with like a soundtrack, so you can play the soundtrack as you're playing the game, and it gets crazier and more hectic by the end, so it could be thematically wonderful, or you could find it anxiety-inducing and you might want to play the game without the soundtrack. But that is Escape: Curse of the Temple, and the version in this campaign is the 2nd edition of the big box that was originally printed in 2017. There was a 1st edition of the big box that came out in 2014, but they made some changes to it and they did a 2nd version in 2017, and that is the version that we're talking about in this campaign. Fresco Mega Box has a player count of 2 to 4 players, plays in about 60 to 90 minutes. This has players playing as fresco painters in Renaissance Italy and trying to finish painting a cathedral ceiling. It's mainly a set collection game, but the theme is pretty cool and I think makes it stand out. And in any of these games, you're getting like a big box. It's going to have so much stuff in it. And the way Queen Games does a lot of these things, they put out these Queenies, which are these little kind of mini modules. And so these big boxes usually collect a lot of the mini modules, which just gives you incredible variability. So if you like set collection games and you're looking for a medium light one, which is the complexity on Fresco, and the theme is intriguing to you, this is the kind of game in the big box version that is going to give you so much variability, it'll stay fresh for a very long time. The 3rd game is Merlin. This is the Merlin Big Box. This is a game for 2 to 4 players that plays in about 75 to 120 minutes. Complexity on this one is heavy. It's a Stefan Feld game. Actually, he's one of 2 designers on it. It's a worker placement game, and it's themed around King Arthur, Knights of the Round Table, Merlin, Morgana. There was an expansion, a Morgana expansion, so that is part of this big box. It uses things like area majority, a rondel, set collection. I don't know if there's as many kind of little Queenie mini expansions. I think this big box is more collecting the base game and 1 or 2 bigger expansions, including that Morgana expansion, but you're getting a lot of value in the box. The complexity on this one is heavy, and with Stefan Feld as a co-designer, you know you're going to get a really good crunchy game, and once you throw in those expansions, there's a lot of variability, a lot of stuff that you can do. I think this one, when it was released, it didn't make the biggest splash, but then once the Morgana expansion was released and the big box, it kind of grew in popularity. So this is something that, I don't know, the average gamer may not be as aware of, or maybe they became aware of it later on as it started to gain popularity. But I think this is a really good version of this game to get. Now, as far as designers and artists go, instead of just giving you all the designers at once and then all the artists, which is what I usually do, I'm going to break it up by game. So first I'm talking about Escape: Curse of the Temple. The designer here is Christian Amundsen Ostby. He's worked on Escape: The Curse of the Temple, The Magnificent, Santa Maria, and Trails of Tucana. And the artist on Escape is Oliver Schlemmer. He is the artist for Escape: Curse of the Temple. He's also the artist for Fresco. So when I get to Fresco in a minute, I'm not going to mention him again there. He's the artist of both games. And he also worked on a game called Kingdom Builder, which is also published by Queen Games, I believe. There are 3 designers on Fresco. Wolfgang Panning has worked on Fresco, Maharani, and a game called Olay. And then both Marco Roskowski and Marcel Subelbeck have both worked on Fresco, Cobalt, and Parfum. There is a second artist on Fresco, so it's not just Oliver Schlemmer. The other artist is Patricia Limburger, and she's best known for 12 Thieves, Alhambra, and Fresco. On the design team for Merlin, we've got Stefan Feld, who's best known for Bora Bora, Bruges, The Castles of Burgundy, Merlin, and Trajan, and Michael Reinach, who's worked on Cuba, Merlin, The Pillars of the Earth, and World Without End. And the art on Merlin is by Dennis Lohausen, who's probably best known for Ark Nova, A Feast for Odin, Gaia Project, Merlin, and Terra Mystica. Finally, all 3 games are published by Queen Games. They're probably best known for Amerigo, Chicago Express, Fresco, Lancaster, and Shogun. There's a few different bundle pledges, so you can get most of the games either by themselves or bundled with one of the other games. I normally don't list any pledges that have less than 100 copies. Usually I just think it's unnecessary because there's just not enough to go around, so I kind of don't want to promote something that has a very limited number of copies. I am, however, going to do it for this one because some of the versions have limited copies for Escape Curse of the Temple. That includes the first pledge level, which is $73 for the Escape Big Box. That's going to come with the second edition of the Big Box and also an Escape Curse of the Temple roll and write. Now, at the time that I'm making this video, there were only 18 of 50 copies left for that pledge level. For $94, you can pledge the Merlin Big Box, and there are no limitations to that pledge level. For $99, you can pledge the Fresco Mega Box. That's also going to come with a Fresco card and dice game, and there are no limits on that pledge level. For $156, you can pledge the Merlin plus Escape bundle, and last time I looked, there were 46 of 50 copies left for that bundle. Now, whenever I talk about the bundles as I'm kind of moving on, if I'm talking about Escape bundle, they'll all come with the Escape roll and write packed in. And if I'm talking about Fresco, anything with Fresco, the Mega Box, will come with the Fresco card and dice game included as well. For $161, you can pledge the Fresco and Escape bundle. Last time I looked, there were 45 of 50 copies left at that level. And you're probably noticing as I'm going through these that the ones that are limited are anything that includes the Escape Big Box. I'm not sure if that's because of the Big Box itself or because of the roll and write that's packaged in with it, but either way, the limited quantity pledges are all the ones with the Escape Big Box included. That means there's no limit on the $177 pledge for Merlin and Fresco bundle. There is an all-in pledge that includes all 3. In fact, there's 2 pledges because the first of those pledges gives you a discount. So it's only $208. It is the early bird all-in bundle. Pledge it while you can get it. It's just basically a limited quantity thing. And last I checked, there were 27 of 50 copies left there. Once that sells out, you'll just have to pledge the higher rate. That is $234. That is the all-in bundle. That includes all of the games. There's actually no limits on this one. So this is a way to get the Escape Curse of the Temple Big Box and the roll and write, and they will not sell out at this rate. But you're saving $26 if you're able to pledge the early bird price in the previous pledge level. Now, shipping in the continental US has been estimated at $18, $23, or $30. That's not dependent on pledge so much as the number of games that you get. So if you're pledging 1 game, you've got the lowest shipping estimate, 2 games, it's the middle, 3 games, it's the highest shipping estimate. Keeping in mind, I believe, that for the bundles, like where you're getting Escape Curse of the Temple Big Box with the roll and write, or the Fresco Mega Box with the card and dice game, I believe that's counting as 1 game. So if you're pledging a bundle, with like Merlin and Fresco, you're going to be getting the second shipping rate. And if you're pledging the all-in, you're going to get the highest shipping rate. Finally, Queen Games is planning on delivering these bundle packages in March of 2023. Let's quickly talk about the 3 of 5 games that I personally pledged from last week's video. The first of those was Oathsworn Into the Deepwood, second printing. This is a dungeon crawler that has had so much positive things said about it since it first came out. I think I would put it on a level with Madara and Chronicles of Drunagor. And I think if you look at Board Game Arena, its score right now is sitting in the 9s. And that is based on people who it's been delivered to them the first time around, they've played it, they really, really like it. So it was a game that was on my short list of things to obtain. I passed it the first time around just because I thought it's a big dungeon crawler, it's really expensive, it's by a newer company, it's the first big thing that they've done, I think. So I didn't want to just blindly pledge for it for the amount of money that this thing was. But when they did the second printing and I knew the quality level was there, it was a game that I wanted to acquire, so I did pledge that one. I also pledged the Queen's Dilemma, which is by the same team that did the King's Dilemma. This is a legacy game, but it's very much about voting and negotiation, so it's less about Euro mechanics. There are some mechanics in the game, but it's more about negotiation and talking. You're basically playing the role of advisors, and you're trying to steer the future of a country. And the choices that you make will compound and influence things that happen later in the game. And I have heard really good things about the King's Dilemma. You weren't able to get it through this campaign, but they had kind of like a discount through the website to get a King's Dilemma bundle that came with some other things. So I did go ahead, I ordered that as well. That's coming very soon, I think this weekend. Hopefully we'll get that, we'll play that with some friends and we'll really like it. And then when Queen's Dilemma delivers, we'll be raring to go and really excited about it. I also backed Spirit Island Nature Incarnate, which is supposed to be one of the toughest co-op games out there. If you play with more than 1 or 2 players, it can get really crunchy because, I think cooperative games in general can be a little problematic because there are armchair quarterbacks out there, alpha gamers, who want to tell other players what to do. And Spirit Island can be fairly crunchy. So if someone makes a bad or inefficient move, it can really affect everybody else and lose them the game. And a lot of these decisions kind of compound on one another. So I think if you're playing Spirit Island, you want to play with a good group of people who like some table talk, aren't put off by it, but also aren't going to try to control other players' turns. And that can be a limiting factor for it a little bit. If that's a problem for you, I think just play it at 1 or 2 players. It's generally, from what I know, considered to be one of the best co-ops out there, and it's also probably the heaviest co-op, maybe along with something like Unsettled. It's a game that I've had in my collection for a while. I haven't gotten it to the table yet, hoping to do that very soon. I have a friend I've been playing games with a lot lately, and she really wants to play it as well, so hopefully we'll get to it very, very soon. But I know I'm going to like it. It's just one of those games I've looked at and I know I'm going to like it, so I backed it for all the new stuff. Finally, let's talk about the 3 games that I've acquired into my collection since the last video. The first of these is Mind Management, I like to call it. It's actually called Mind MGMT. I call it Mind Management because I think that's what's happening in the game. You actually are managing minds. And it's a deduction game. It's designed by Jay Cormier. He just kickstarted another game that has some deduction elements in it called Harrow County, which I covered. And I passed Mind Management the first time that it was on crowdfunding because I'm not hugely into deduction games. I've played the likes of Whitechapel Mystery, Fury of Dracula a couple times, and I've kind of got all I need out of it. But I saw the reviews, I saw some gameplay from Mind Management, and I thought this is the deduction game for me. So when it came back on Kickstarter, along with some additional cards, there's a way in the game to kind of trigger these cards, but they gave you physical copies through this newer Kickstarter. It was my opportunity to jump on and play it. And it's something that I'm hoping to play soon in future weeks. Once I do, I'll report back to you. But this is a game, I think, that's really primed to you for that question. Is this a game that you want me to cover in a teach and review video? Is Mind Management something that you want more information on and maybe my take on it in full? I also got Wayfarers of the South Tigris. That is the new Garpel games. It's the first game in a new trilogy for them. They've kind of got a new art style going on with it. They're changing the locale a little bit away from predominantly white cultures. And it's just delivered. I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but I've heard really good things about it. I've heard very favorable comparisons to Viscounts of the West Kingdom. And that may be my favorite of the Garpel games output. So the fact that it's being compared to Viscounts, saying there are some similarities to Viscounts, and there's a lot of favorable comparisons, I'm really looking forward to Wayfarers, and I'm hoping to get it to the table very soon as well. So that's another game. Let me know if you want a teach and review video from me for that game, and whether you want that kind of put to the top of the queue in what I'll be producing at the beginning of 2023. The third and final thing that was delivered is the Wingspan nesting box, which was preloaded with Wingspan Asia, the newest expansion. And it is just a big box to kind of store everything in, to bring in all the expansions, plus it includes the latest expansion. I talked about Wingspan at the top of this video, so you know I really, really like it. And I can't wait to have more content and start going through playing all the different expansions, experiencing all the card combinations. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm a big Wingspan lover. That wraps the video for today. Thank you very much for watching and spending some time with me. I'll be back next week with another Kickstarter Weekly. It's looking to be a very big video. It's also going to be, I'm going to be working on it over Thanksgiving. I am going out of town for a couple days for Thanksgiving, so it may hit kind of the end of next weekend, at the end of Thanksgiving weekend. So if it's a little bit on the late side or it's showing up late, just keep your eyes peeled. It will be coming out. It also looks like there's going to be a lot of content in that video, a lot of campaigns that are funding that next week that I'll be looking at. So it's probably going to be a longer video, especially in the campaign section. In the meantime, over the next week, over Thanksgiving, I hope you have a chance to play a lot of great games. I'm going to try to get some really good games in this weekend and over Thanksgiving, and I will report back to you when I publish my next video about all the games that I've played and what I think about them. In the meantime, take care and have a great holiday season. I'll see you soon.